Good evening. Welcome to St. Peter's in Hove. I'm Father Alexander, and here we are doing our 170th step in our walking tour through the Bible, and we've come to Psalm 73 brackets 74. In the breviary, it's entitled Lament for the Ruined Temple, and that's what it is. It does what it says on the tin. It is a lament for the ruined temple. Why, O God, have you cast us off forever? Why blaze with anger at the sheep of your pasture? Remember your people, whom you chose long ago, the tribe you redeemed to be your own possession, the mountain of Zion, where you made your dwelling. Turn your steps to these places that are utterly ruined. The enemy has laid waste the whole of the sanctuary. Your foes have made uproar in your house of prayer. They have set up their emblems, their foreign emblems, high above the entrance to the sanctuary. Their axes have battered the wood of its doors. They have struck together with hatchet and pickaxe. O God, they have set your sanctuary on fire. They have razed and profaned the place where you dwell. They said in their hearts, let us utterly crush them. Let us burn every shrine of God in the land. There is no sign from God, nor have we a prophet. We have no one to tell us how long it will last. How long, O Lord, is the enemy to scoff? Is the foe to insult your name forever? Why, O Lord, do you hold back your hand? Why do you keep your right hand hidden? Yet God is our King from time past, the giver of help through all the land. That's the first part of the psalm. Well, it's obviously talking about the Babylonian sacking and burning of Jerusalem and the destruction of the Temple of Solomon. How long was it to last was actually about 80 years. They were carted off into exile, then they came back to their land, and they were finally able to rebuild the temple. Then, of course, the temple was destroyed yet again by the Romans. But this refers to the destruction of the temple by the Babylonians. And it talks about their emblems, their pagan emblems, being raised high above the temple gates. They battered the wood of its doors, they burnt it down. They have set your sanctuary on fire. They've razed and profaned the place where you dwell. For the Jews, the destruction of the temple wasn't just heartbreaking, it was traumatic. God had given them a guarantee that he would always be with them and that the temple was his dwelling place. The temple has now been destroyed. So, what has happened to the dwelling place of God? Where is God? God has abandoned them. The promised land has ceased to be a promised land. They've been cast off into exile. The promise has been so seemingly revoked. And they are no longer the chosen people because they're no longer really a people because God is no longer in their midst. There are lots of beautiful and rather sad historical echoes with this psalm. Imagine you were an English Catholic living in the reign of Edward VI, that horrible little boy who reigned until his 17th year, the one who presided over the great iconoclasm that swept over England and which supposedly destroyed 90% of the works of art in England. On top of, don't forget, the dissolution of the chantries and the dissolution of the monasteries. Indeed, if you're an English Catholic living in, let's say, the year 1554, you would think that your foes have made uproar in your house of prayer. They have struck with hatchet and pickaxe. They've set your sanctuary on fire. Let us burn every shrine of God in the land, and so on. They have made. Are they to insult your name forever? And indeed, let's say the great rebellions that happened in the reign of Edward VI. The one was for the restoration of the Mass, saying we don't like this new prayer book. It's alien. It's like a Christmas game, is what they said. This was the Western Rebellion. Also, the monasteries, the ruins of the monasteries, would have been a perpetual reminder to people of the terrible changes that overcome England. And of course, their parish churches still carried on. But inside the parish churches, the Mass was no longer celebrated. Instead, a very strange substitute was being celebrated without vestments, without candles, without a crucifix, and so on. So the desolation felt by Catholic English people would have been comparable to the desolation that's evoked in this psalm. Then, of course, that's not the only example, because don't forget, by the time, Queen Mary brought back the Catholic religion, but by the time of Elizabeth, the Catholics were about 30,000 people in all in the whole of England. They were a bunch of defeated people, and Catholicism seemed to have been completely extirpated from England. 1,500 years of history had been destroyed. There are other parallels, historical parallels. You will have worked out by now that I love historical parallels. Another parallel was, of course, what happened in North Africa with the invasion of the Muslims from the Arabian Peninsula. A flourishing church in St. Augustine's land, now Algeria, was completely destroyed. This church possibly had been very severely damaged by the Vandalic incursions in the 5th century, but in the 7th century it was completely wiped out. Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco have no native Christians, or very, very few who would be converts. Let's say in Egypt the church survived, in Syria the church survived, in Palestine the church survived, although much reduced. But in these other lands, the church completely ceased to exist. This actually is rather a singular event in Christian history. In most places, the church hung on, but not in the lands of the Maghreb, the lands of Western North Africa. It's true that in parts of Asia Minor, there are no Christians whatsoever, even though there were churches. But until fairly recently, until the 1920s, there were lots of Christians in Asia Minor. They were driven out at the beginning of sort of the foundations of the modern Turkish Republic. So it does happen that you go to places where Christians once lived and where there are no Christians. And of course, it's also true that you go to places where Jews once lived and there are no more Jews. Simon Schama said, didn't he, in that History of the Jews, I'm sick and tired of going to places where Jews once lived, seeing empty synagogues, seeing the fruits of persecution, the fact that they've all gone. But there are quite a lot of countries where Christianity has died the death. I was once told in a nice way that I was completely wrong when I alluded to, on a radio program, I was with Ruth Gledhill, who's a very dear person, and I alluded to the fact that, Christianity might disappear from England, or at least the Catholic Church might disappear from England. She said, oh, the Catholic Church is not going to disappear from England, she said. And she was quite surprised that anybody could mention this. I don't think it's something that should surprise one. I think it should be mentioned. I think it should be discussed. It is possible, because it's happened before, that the church can disappear. And why have you cast us off forever? Asked the psalmist. How did this happen? Asked the psalmist. Oh Lord, how long is the enemy to scoff? He's saying, okay, we've sinned, but the person who's suffering here is God. How is it that God allows his faithful people to be wiped off the face of the earth? How is it that God allows his sacred building to be erased, the true worship offered him to be blotted out? And then the second part of the psalm does say, well, God is sovereign. And even though this disaster has overcome us, the sovereignty of God will be reasserted. It was you who divided the sea by your might, who shattered the heads of the monsters of the sea. You're all powerful. Therefore, you'll deal with the Babylonians. You'll deal with Henry VIII. You'll deal with the hordes who invaded Algeria. It was you who crushed Leviathan's heads and gave them as food to the untamed beasts. It was you who opened springs and torrents. It was you who dried up ever-flowing rivers. Yours is the day and yours is the night. It was you who appointed the light and the sun. It was you who fixed the bounds of the earth. You who made both summer and winter. You've done all this. Remember this, Lord, and see the enemy scoffing. And the enemy nowadays is not the people who invaded North Africa. It's not the Babylonians. The enemy is, I suppose, those who hold Christianity in contempt. See the enemy scoffing. A senseless people insults your name. Do not give Israel your dove to the hawk, nor forget the life of your poor ones forever. Do not let your church, Israel, be victimized in this way. Remember your covenant. Every cave in the land is a place where violence makes its home. Do not let your oppressed return disappointed. Let the poor and the needy bless your name. Arise, O God, and defend your cause. Remember how the senseless revile you all the day. Do not forget the clamour of your foes, the daily increasing uproar of your foes. This is clearly the prayer of the persecuted Christian. And the persecuted Christian is to be found in all four corners of the world today. Nigeria is one that particularly comes to mind, where we just had this horrific satanic, as the bishop called it, the bishop of the diocese called it, satanic attack on a church on Pentecost Sunday. Arise, O God, and defend your cause. The church is persecuted, and by that I don't mean an institution is persecuted. I mean the people who make up the church are persecuted. And this persecution of the church, some places it's very mild, some places it's very severe, some places it's very violent indeed. Other places it's not violent, but it's certainly malicious. It's certainly not full of goodwill. In fact, anybody who persecutes the church is malicious. We must pray that God may rebuke them. This is a very strong prayer that God will do just that. Arise, O God, and defend your cause. Why isn't he defending his cause? Well, I suppose the answer is he wants us to be put on trial. He wants us to prove our virtue. He wants us to prove our courage. He wants us to step up to the plate and defend the church. Arise, O God, and defend your cause. Who is going to defend the cause of God now, if not us? All the best. Bye for now.